Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Kreitis. Today is April 2nd, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope everyone is doing well. So a few stories we're going to cover today. A brief update to the Brexit soap opera. I want to also discuss some foreign news today. We haven't discussed what's going on in Venezuela recently, so I want to touch on that. And then somewhere in between here, we're going to talk about the voting age, because we have a lot of Democrats now seemingly wanting to lower the voting age to 16 years old, which is just ridiculous on its face. But we're going to talk about it because this is what we are dealing with in 2019. But first to the Brexit. So this morning, Prime Minister Theresa May took part in meetings with her cabinet and other members of her government. It was something several hours long, 7-8 hours long. Various things were obviously discussed. But what were the conclusions? Well, it appears that this continues to remain in limbo. It now appears that my concern of perhaps a cynical plan might be taking place, because now there may very well be a softer kind of Brexit. This, in my opinion, is not what the people voted for in 2016. What this is coming down to is a bunch of people in the UK Parliament, the majority of which voted to remain, who do not want to make good on the people's vote, on the people's voice, and on the will of the British people back in 2016. This is a shame. Now, this doesn't mean that this is a foregone conclusion that it will be a softer Brexit, but what I mean by this is Theresa May now seemingly has more, how do I want to put this, more consideration for Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, which would just simply mean it's going to be a softer Brexit, that it will remain some sort of customs union, which is what the British people voted against. That's not what they wanted. It's not what they want. Are there people that do want that? Sure. But that was the losing side of the debate. That was the losing side of the argument. That was the losing side of the referendum. I'm sorry you lost. Get over it and move on. Everybody just wants to throw a hissy fit in the 21st century, and they continue their hissy fit until they get their way. This is driving me insane. But this is where we are. It doesn't matter if you're on this side of the Atlantic, on that side of the Atlantic, on the other side of the Pacific. It makes no difference. This is the state of politics in the 21st century. This is a true shame. We say this all the time here because we're going on 3 years and there is still not an agreement. I mean, seemingly the Prime Minister finally gets it through her head that her deal is not going to pass. Although that doesn't mean that it will not be put up again, but it's highly unlikely because now she is reaching across the aisle in a more spirited voice and a more spirited effort for compromise with that of the Labour Party. I told you guys before, not too long ago, because they've been flying back and forth between London and Brussels, having conversations. And I said it was, to me, it was rather, well, it seemed underhanded to me that Jeremy Corbyn was also speaking with EU bureaucrats, not with the Prime Minister. So it was like, well, what's going on here? Is there some sort of backroom deal going on? Can Jeremy Corbyn get something to happen to make this a softer Brexit, to get another referendum out there on the ballot? I mean, something just didn't seem right to me. I mean, that could just be how the politics, that just could be how they function for the British people, and that's fine if that's how it is, but it just seemed a little odd to me because you have two people, Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn, at least publicly having opposing viewpoints. Theresa May, again, at least publicly, has been out there stating, look, I wanted to remain, a whole bunch of people wanted to remain, but that was not the outcome of the referendum. Therefore, it is our duty. Therefore, for the sake of democracy and these types of institutions, we must perform. We must carry out the wishes of the British people. I mean, that seems rather simple. Why these politicians can't get this wrapped around their head is beyond me, except that it's politics, and that's all it is. Most of them wanted to remain, and so they're going to do as much as they can to make that happen, to make this difficult, to put on a show for the people, to say, look how difficult this is. You didn't understand, children. You didn't understand, children, how difficult this was going to be. Didn't you know that this wasn't easy, that this would not be fair, that it would take a long time? Didn't you understand this? Now go back and vote for a second time and vote how we want you to, which this time vote to remain. That's sickening. It's disheartening. I'm telling you guys, this is an historic moment for all of time. It really is, and I'm not being overdramatic here. I don't believe that I am, because this is what we're facing. You look at the economic sphere of things, you have people who are basically bowing down to China. They're communists. They're communists. People think they have the special sauce. They're communist. They can tell their people what to do. Everything works out great. They can just take on more and more debt. They can print all their money, no problems whatsoever, because they got 1.4 billion people and they're a communistic regime. This is who we're listening to. This is who many people, politicians and countries are bowing down to. The Chinese, a bunch of communists. This is why this is so important. Because if they can crack the code in the UK and have this whole thing undone, that's it. That's it for Europe. It's it for Europe. Then the last hope is the United States of America, and that's slipping by the wayside every day because of the lunatic fringe that is just becoming more and more mainstream as we make our way through the 21st century. And once the USA goes down, if it goes down, and I pray it never does, but if it does, I mean, that's it. That's it. Big Brother will be here, because that is exactly what China will move forward to, because they don't care. They don't care about your privacy. They don't care about facial recognition. They don't care about a whole host of things. I mean, they already have that Big Brother 1984 scenario going over there. I can't even remember what it's called. Something consumer credit. I mean, they have everybody logged. Here's how you are as a citizen. They rank you. They give you a name and a number. And that's it. They know everything about you. I don't want to live in that type of world. Democracy is supposed to protect against this type of stuff. When it goes by the wayside, it's dictatorship. It's communism. It's socialism. It's fascism. That's what it'll be. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So the Brexit saga continues, and it will continue. But again, just for a reminder for everybody out there, Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn now, they have until April 12th. That's the deadline. And it basically has to be before that to have something that the Parliament will vote for. To say, yeah, we agree with what this new deal is, whatever it might be. And then it has to go to the members of the EU. So 27 nations all have to agree to it, because Theresa May is going to want another extension to get this thing done, because they're not going to get it done in 10 days. It's just not going to happen. They didn't get it done in 3 years. They're not going to get it done in 10 days. So they're going to need another extension. And then she comes out, that being Theresa May, saying, well, it's going to have to be a short extension. It's going to have to be short. Nobody really knows what that means, except, well, maybe we're going to have to stick with the May 22nd deadline, because we do not want to partake in the EU parliamentary elections. So this is just going back and forth. I really hoped that this wasn't a cynical ploy by Theresa May all along to do this, to get something going like this, to just continuously kick the can down the road, because then you have people who are still egging Jeremy Corbyn on to put the second referendum to the table and to make that an option, which again is just should never, ever happen. And if it does, the British people better revolt. They better revolt to save themselves. And again, going back to the conversation we had yesterday in regards to the the Scottish Nationalist Party, no offense there, the SNP, they want their independence from the UK. Go ahead and leave. Go ahead and declare your independence if that's what you want. I'm all for it. If you believe that your sovereignty, that your voice is not heard and well represented within the British Parliament, then leave. That should be your right, in my opinion. I don't have any problem with that. But that is exactly what the British people did in 2016 in regards to the EU. They said our sovereignty has been usurped. We don't like these laws. We don't like the fact that we have to take orders from no names and no-faced EU bureaucrats, people that aren't British. I mean, what are their motives? What are their interests? We don't like this. We don't trust these people. Plus, we're spending billions and billions of pounds every year to this organization, and what are we getting in return? Now, the arguments were made. Obviously, there were those who thought it was a fantastic thing to be a part of the EU. That's fine. That's fine if that's what you believe. But it's also fine for people to believe that it wasn't a good deal, that it didn't make sense, that they would rather be in control 100% of their destiny, not give it to some bureaucrats in Brussels that they don't know. Makes complete sense. And they won. Now, had they lost, who knows what would have transpired. But that's not the scenario in which we live. So this is a shame. This is a failure of politics. No surprise. And I hope that's the end of it. I mean, I would just like these guys to just leave. Just say, okay, we're done. April 12th, see you later. And deal with it. It'll be bumpy for a few months, but we'll figure it out. I mean, the UK they're not small potatoes. They're a large economy. They are a major, major financial sector in the global economy. They're not just going to go by the wayside. Well, we're out of the EU, now we're done. There's no way. There's no way. You guys understand the history of the UK, of the British people. The sun never set on the British Empire. You think leaving the EU, they're just going to collapse? I mean, that's laughable. It would have to be a coordinated effort, not only by all of the members of the European Union, but also other countries in Europe that are not a part of the European Union, Asian nations, the United States. Everybody would have to say, screw you, British people, you're done, because you left the EU. That's just not going to happen. They will continue to trade with other nations. They will. And the other nations within Europe and the European Union will want to trade with UK because they are a huge customer. They're a huge customer, and they very well may be a huge supplier. They're not just going to say, see you later, because you wanted to leave. Not going to happen. That's the fear-mongering, which will obviously always continue and will always be there, because people will always have another objective, another motive. They will be sore losers, and that's what we're witnessing. So that's no surprise. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. We'll see what happens this week, because these guys, they only have another 10 days to get their act together. Or it's a hard Brexit. That's my vote. But I'll be very surprised if that's what happens because of this last-minute ditch for a softer Brexit. We'll see what happens. Now, moving on real briefly here to the voting age with these lunatics here in the United States calling for the voting age to be reduced to 16. I mean, what are they doing? Isn't it enough with everything else? All of the free crap that they're going to offer, which of course is not free, which is stuff that the government shouldn't be offering or managing to begin with. But now they want to lower the age to 16. I mean, it's 18 right now. I think 18's too low. How many 16-year-olds do you know that pay bills, have a lot of responsibilities, own property, own stocks and bonds, trade in the markets, own a home, have children? I mean, what are the responsibilities? Have a job, have had a job for a long time, can legally enter into contracts. Oh, that's right, they can't legally enter into contracts because they're children unless their parents sign off on it. This is ridiculous. What do they know? Have they ever had what is their level and understanding of this country's founding? Not that great. We know this because the government is in charge of education. What are their math skills? Not great. Government's in charge of education. What's their reading skills? Not great. Government's in charge of education. What's their, comprehension level on all of this stuff? Are they even engaged? Do they even know who these people are? Do they know what types of questions to ask? No, of course they don't. And I'm not insulting 16-year-olds. They're just more focused on other things. Even if they were highly focused on government, they still wouldn't have the right, in my opinion, to vote at 16. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. How many of them have received a paycheck and understand what's going on? How much tax is taken out of their paycheck? Do they understand this? Most of them don't. Most adults, 18 years old plus, have no idea what's going on. Our politicians have no idea what's going on. And we're supposed to now lower it to 16? I mean, this is just as cynical as it gets and in your face, insulting as it gets from the lunatic left, because they know perfectly well that most of these young people are going to vote for them because they say, oh, well, it's free. It's free. And they're also worried about all of these social norms and the political correctness that has nothing to do with government whatsoever. Nothing to do with government whatsoever. If you don't like the way somebody looks, don't look at them. You don't like what they're saying, don't listen. Why does the government have to get involved and mandate all of this stuff? That there be men, women, trees, a third gender, 15 genders. What is this? Where are we? I mean, if people used to come out and they used to claim that they were something other than they were, that everybody knew that they were, you'd lock them up and throw them in the loony bin. Now they got to be protected and praised and thrown on TV to write books and give speeches and get elected to Congress. I can't make this up. This is the world in which we live. Give me your suggestions. Give me your thoughts on this stuff, because this is just madness. 16-year-old voting on what? Let them vote for the prom king and queen and be done with it. They don't know what's going on in the world. Most people don't know what's going on in the world. They're going to vote for free stuff because they actually think it's free. Just like people who are 18 and older actually think it's going to be free. And that's scary. This is just beyond the pale. And now you see with a lot of other issues, especially with climate change, you have a lot of kids out there now, they even get on the media, and they're now advocates for climate change as if they're experts. And we're supposed to listen to these children as if they're experts. They don't know anything. I'm not going to listen to some kid tell me anything. It's just ridiculous. They have no life experience. They are simply rattling off what they've heard from somebody else. What's their credibility? Who are they? I mean, this is just beyond the pale now. That we look to children to give us advice on global economic affairs, on global climate change, on political issues. I mean, look, if the kids were geniuses, it'd be another story. I'd say, well, you know what? Yeah. But they're not. They're not even close to it. And I mean no insult or disrespect for these kids, but it's just the reality of it. It's just the reality of it. It's just getting beyond ridiculous. This is the lunatic fringe. You want to vote for this, this is what you're going to get. I mean, are we going to have 16-year-olds in the Situation Room with the President of the United States? Well, Tommy, should I push the button or shouldn't I? Well, let's ask him, because he's an expert on, nuclear war and military strategies and tactics. Let's ask him. He knows. He's a voter. Don't you want his opinion? Pocahontas, Crazy Bernie? They voted for you. They must be geniuses since they voted for you. Now you got to ask them some questions about some global issues because they have the answers. They put you in. They must be smart. That's the world in which we live. I pray these people do not get elected. I mean, they're already in the Senate and in the House. And look at the results they get for you. Look how bad it is. And nobody's talking about them. Nobody's talking about them. We want to talk about a Green New Deal, which is ridiculous. That is beyond expensive. That just ain't going to happen. But that's what we focus our attention to. We still have the three-ring circuses of this Mueller report and the president, his campaign, his family, his administration continuing to be investigated. So that three-ring circus is going to continue. And a whole slew of other things. But we have $22 trillion in debt. We have terrible demographics. We have Medicare, Social Security, a whole bunch of unfunded liabilities that are in the hundreds of trillions of dollars, but nobody could care less. Couldn't care less. That's where we are. Now, another thing of issue, of importance, something to discuss, is Venezuela. Because you still have the Maduro regime in there. And now you have loyalists to Maduro. Today, they've stripped Juan Guaido of his immunity. Juan Guaido is the guy who claims to be the president. That's who the United States, along with some 50 other nations around the world, claim is the rightful president. And now you have Russia, and I believe Chinese, military personnel in Venezuela. And they're not supporting Juan Guaido. No. They are supporting Maduro. So what is going on here? In the midst that we still have a U.S.-China trade talk that is, it's just going swimmingly well, but the Chinese are in Venezuela working against us. So I don't know how well, I don't know what swimmingly means. I don't know how well that's actually what's going to transpire there. I mean, we're told it's going to be the best thing ever, but I just don't know. So here we have American empire once again. This, to me, is probably pushed very heavily by John Bolton, who is a neoconservative. Again, just wants to invade. Marco Rubio is again out there tweeting and has the president's ear on a lot of this stuff. I told you guys before, half jokingly, but, still, I'm half serious here. Send Marco Rubio down there. If you want the American empire, let's just do it. Let's kick the Russians and the Chinese out of there. We said, we want it. End of the story. And Senor Marco Rubio is going to be El Presidente of Venezuela. Just do it. And then, if you want oil prices down, Trump, well, Venezuela's got the mother lode. Start pumping. And you can solve that problem. It's not that difficult. Just do it. You want empire? That's what you do. That's what you do. You kick rear ends and you take names. So just do it. Just say that that's the American way. Because how is this going to escalate? Because you have 3 world powers, nuclear powers now engaged with Venezuela. United States, China, and Russia. That's not setting up for a good end. And you have Trump who wants to play the strong man too and is basically warning, Russia, you better get out of here. Well, what happens if Vladimir Putin says, or what? Or else what? What's he going to do? This is the problem with empire. Mind your own business. Stay in your own neighborhood. Practice what you preach. You don't have to go around trying to be Robin Hood and saving everybody. Because you're doing it with other people's lives. You're doing it with other 18-year-old, 19-year-olds. You're just sending them all over the world for commodities at the end of the day. What does Venezuela have? Well, they got oil and natural gas. All right, well, we want it, so we go there. What does Iraq have? Well, they got oil and natural gas, so we go there. No weapons of mass destruction. Well, that's okay. Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. Yeah, but we worked for him, and we really kind of put him in power for a long time. But yeah, don't pay attention to the facts. They have oil and natural gas, and that's what we want. So we go there. Well, with weapons of mass destruction, who cares? That was just a story to tell the children so we can get an excuse. At least we removed a bad man. And you go back to sleep and you think, there's nothing of it. I have a problem with that because it's trillions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. It's thousands of lives lost, ruined, destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis' lives ruined, destroyed, displaced. But who could care less? As long as we can continue to pump oil, all is well in the world. And now we're going to do this in Venezuela. I talk about Brexit being historic. It is. I really hope that nothing erupts down in Venezuela. I really hope that. I mean, if the people don't like Maduro, let them vote him out. Let them have their institutions. Let them have their say in their country. Because God knows nobody is allowed to bother the Americans in our elections, but we can bother everybody else in theirs. And there's nothing wrong with it. Oh, but there is. There is. There's a big problem with it. And people better wake up to this because nobody's talking about this. Nobody talks about the debt. Nobody talks about the major issues. But 16-year-olds are going to be voting, so all's well in the world. Oh, it's crazy. But I love you guys. I'll catch you next time. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Kreitis. Godspeed.